We want to extend a warm welcome to the participants who have taken the time to join us today. So yes, our team is very pleased to have the opportunity to deliver this seminar this morning on the work that we're doing to deliver, design and develop climate early warning information. We're especially pleased to be interacting with the tourism sector today on this because CIMH has not traditionally had a very strong relationship with this sector in terms of, outreach for our suite of products. And so this is something that we really want to change because we actually think that we have the right specs for a more meaningful relationship. And I'll attempt to tell you why. So as we know, the region has had to cope with the impacts of a number of environmental crises. So very high on that list, for example, would be the sargassum seaweed landings, which plague several destinations and coastal hotels that operate in them. And our organization, CIMH, has been instrumental in monitoring and forecasting the next potentially big crises on the horizon. Yes, so as I was saying, I was telling you about the role of CIMH, that we've been instrumental in monitoring and forecasting the next potentially big crises on the horizon. And these are the increasingly severe drought situation that is affecting many territories, as well as a soon-to-be-realized coral bleaching event throughout much of the Caribbean. And according to the science, these two events are coming about largely as a result of a large-scale climate phenomena that is known as the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So some of you may have heard that not only are we in a El Nino year, but that this year's El Nino is among the strongest on record. So the question becomes, well, why should the hotel sector care about this? Well, we believe that you should care because the tourism high season, of course, we all know, which the region is moving into now, typically coincides with the dry season. And this year, that dry season is going to be particularly severe. So hoteliers, you now have a situation where there are many things working against you. Your territories are likely to have scarce water resources. At the same time, because of the higher temperatures, you're likely to be dealing with increased guest demand for water-intensive facilities, such as swimming in swimming pools or taking baths. You'll also have to deal with demand for local cuisine using local ingredients, which you now have to buy at higher prices because agricultural production may decrease. Now, the warmer than normal conditions also have implications for you. For example, many of your beach-loving tourists, or some of them, are likely to be vulnerable to the health effects of higher than normal temperature and humidity levels. And then a little further out from shore, in the coming months, what we expect is that coral reefs will bleach due to unusually warm sea surface temperatures. So what we're seeing on the horizon for the hotel sector is a lot of operational risk at this time, and that is likely to increase in the coming months. The drought and coral bleaching events, we believe, should be of concern to you because, of course, in the near to medium term, they are likely to, translate into increased costs and may actually hurt your bottom line. So those are two of the three key messages that we have for you today. And of course, they're a bit dreary, but the third key message, I think, offers some hope that in the face of these unfolding events and their impacts, early warning information provided by the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology can help you to plan, to prepare, and manage your risk. So I'll stop there, and I'll now turn it over to Cedric, who will tell you more about the drought aspect of the El Nino phenomena and about the products that CIMH has developed for drought early warning. Cedric?
Okay, thank you very much, Roche, for the introduction into what the rest of the presentation will be about. But let me start by mentioning some of the things that climate-wise have been in the news recently because largely of the El Nino. So what you see on the current slide is that we are now this year so far in the top 5 driest years on record in at least the Eastern Caribbean islands, but that also extends to parts of Jamaica, parts of Belize, parts of the Dominican Republic, etc. So this year is among the driest, and we see that also as impacting our environments and our economies. As can be seen, the Potsworth Dam in Antigua is now dry for the 3rd time on record, and usually it provides water for up to 30% of consumption in the island nation of Antigua and Barbuda. We see similar decreases in the water levels in water reservoirs around the region, for instance in Jamaica. What we can also see is that there has been quite some reduced water flow, like for instance in Puerto Rico, where the eastern part is under severe drought with rationed water supplied to San Juan, with some parts of the city receiving water only once every 2 days, some part of the city once every 3 days. So in the Dominican Republic, for instance, there are also impacts to the agricultural sector where the production has been decreased by a sizable 11%, and in Belize there have been millions of dollars of losses in the agricultural sector. So one may wonder, okay, why do we know there's a drought? Well, there is where CIMH can come in. We can actually show the severity or the rarity, because those are 2 associated factors, of the drought at present. We do that thanks to our drought monitoring products. So if you look at the map that is showing the drought situation in the Caribbean on the top left side of the slide that you see in front of you, much of the image is turned red. Red means that we are in exceptional drought. Exceptional drought is drought that occurs only once every 40 years or so. So that means that this is really going to far extremes throughout much of the region. When it's exceptionally dry, it's also severely dry. It's also very rarely as dry. But this is only showing on this map for 6 months drought, which affects mostly the volume of water in small reservoirs, for instance. But there's also observations of short, medium term, like 6 months, and long term, like 12 months drought that is ongoing across the Antilles and into Belize, for instance. So what are some of the implications of those droughts? Well, if you're looking at areas in short to medium term drought, that means more bushfires, that means low agricultural yields, and that means also possible price increase in local goods. If you look at long-term drought, this means that there's unreliable water supply due to water shortages and water consumption restriction. So now we know the situation. Now, how does that compare to a similar year? Well, in 2009, 2010, by far not 40 years ago, we actually had a similar event. And in agriculture, that led to, for instance, agricultural production reduced by to 20% in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with huge price inflation for some products. There was also reduced output in Antigua and Barbuda. There were tremendous amounts of bushfires, for instance, 160 in the first quarter of 2010, as compared to 103 in the entire previous year. And because of the drought, there's also land degradation, whereby if the land is degraded and the rains come back, and the rains are precipitously coming back, there is always a risk of flooding and landslide, as we have seen now recently in Dominica with Tropical Storm Erika. So we know now how it can compare and how it might play out in the high season of 2015, 2016, if it's comparable to 2009, 2010. But what are we expecting in the coming months for the Caribbean? So the first part of that is what's going to happen to drought itself. Well, our drought alert outlooks, which speak to how high our alert levels should be, how much actions we should actually put in place to fight the impacts of the drought. We are now on a scale from no concern, drought watch, drought warning, and drought emergency. We are in drought warning. That is what you can see on the maps in the orange-brown colors. So this is both the case for short-term, mid-term drought and for long-term drought. And this goes until the end of the next year's high season. So, well, the 2015-2016 high season. So what does that mean? That we will have some increase in surface water supply before December, so before the start of the dry season, but that will be by no means sufficient to recharge our water reservoirs, especially the larger ones. So that means we'll end up with water shortages in the tourism season as being one of the particular threats. But other than talking about drought alone, what is going to happen with our rainfall? Well, our precipitation and our rainfall frequency outlook suggest that we will expect less rain, which is indicated on the left map by the brownish colors. It will fall also less often, whereby we have less days on which rain will fall, meaning more dry days, more sunny days. And this is a good thing. On the other hand, there will be fewer dangerous wet spells. So that means less chance of landslides and floods throughout the dry season. So what are the implications? Well, we will have less potential for flooding. We will have fewer weather-related disruptions of outdoor activities, even though we're now still in the wet season. And I want you to bear in mind that until the end of the wet season, which coincides with our hurricane season, one tropical cyclone could be enough to change the whole picture and to disrupt lives and livelihoods, as we have unfortunately seen in Dominica this year. The last item I will talk about is what about the heat? Because drought usually is accompanied by warmer temperatures too. And unfortunately, this is the case too now. So what our temperature outlook suggests is that it will probably be hotter than usual between now and 6 months from now. So that means that there will be intense heat until the end of this month, more or less, and that there is enhanced health risk from heat exposure. On top of that, there will be higher than usual energy costs for cooling, and there is an enhanced wildfire risk. Now, what we can do about it, we have tried to list from the top of our heads and from also some literature that we've seen, some of the actions that we as a sector, the tourism sector, can put in place to fight some of the consequences of the drought and the heat. Bearing in mind there is also a few positive consequences that are listed here. But ultimately, we need to work with you, and you are more aware than we are by far in how your operations work and how climate plays in these operations. So we would like to, as Rocher will mention later, work with you to define that more clearly. But let me hand over now to Shelley, who will speak about what is happening to our seas.
Hi, good morning. Pleasure to be here. So diving into the blue, we can see that the latest news story coming out of the NOAA, which is the National Ocean and Atmosphere Administration in the United States, that they have declared the 3rd ever global bleaching event. And this is something that does not happen very often. As you can see, there were only 3, and the other events previously occurred in 1998 and 2010. All of these events are associated with moderate to strong El Ninos. And as Cedric mentioned before, we are experiencing one of the stronger El Ninos this year, and this has been reflected in unusually warm temperatures, which result in bleaching. And of course, we know that bleaching occurs when the corals are stressed and they expel what we call the zooxanthellae, or their plant symbiotic friend, which results in the paling or the whitening of our corals. And we can see some pictures here of coral bleaching occurring in Hawaii most recently. And how does this compare to what happened in 2010? Now, this is a shot of the reef in Speyside. This is on the northeast coast of Tobago, and we can see widespread bleaching on these reefs, and Speyside is close to a hotel strip. And I'm sure that diving is part of one of the water sports packages that would be offered by some of these hotels. And the impact that bleaching would have is that persons wouldn't be interested in seeing a reef that is bleached or with a reef that has little or no fish. So this definitely does impact on our tourism product. What happens too when corals bleach? They become more susceptible to diseases, and we can see some of the different diseases that affected the Speyside coral reef back in 2010, October 2010 to be specific. And we love to dive because of the aesthetics and the feeling that we get from seeing the pretty coral reefs and the fish. And I'm sure that no tourist would want to come to see the degradation of our reefs. We provide a monthly bulletin called the Caribbean Coral Reef Watch Bulletin that has two products, one on the monitoring side of things and a forecast. So here we have the monitoring product, which shows alert levels from no stress to alert level 2 of the areas in the Caribbean. So if we look on the left, we can see the alert level guide. On one end, we have that Belize is under alert level 1, which is indicated by the reds close to Belize. But the other islands are under bleaching watches or bleaching warnings. This situation recently changed after the passing of the hurricane, which kind of stirred up some cooler waters. So our last issue of our bulletin, there's now been some updates to it. And what is the validation on the ground? We have already been seeing some bleaching and disease outbreaks in Florida and Cuba, and there are some partial bleaching signs observed in the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. We're looking to our network of stakeholders to report the bleaching events as they happen so that we can report on these things in our monthly bulletins. So that's the monitoring product. Forecasting product, we have an outlook that goes from October to January. And again, the alert levels are similar to the alert level guide presented in the previous slide. And we can see that based on the colors, the two alert levels, that all islands from the Bahamas through all of the Greater and Lesser Antilles are at risk of bleaching through December. And this situation does not look good for our reefs, especially when we've already been having reports of bleaching occurring. On the right of the screen, we can see a gauge showing the situation over the months. If we look at the bleaching outlook in the December and January to February, we can see that the thermal stress conditions would have disappeared by then, so we won't be at risk of bleaching in January or February. It's important to mention that this product will only be produced in May to December of every year, coinciding with the warmer temperatures. So you can check our website to download those products. Now, the implications to the tourism sector, how does this affect you? Of course, as I would mention before, bleaching has a negative impact on the tourism products. Those persons relying on dive-in tourism for especially dive shops and water sports operators. There will be an impact on them. There will be a long-term impact on fisheries because the fish use the coral reefs as their home, and when the coral reefs are degraded, then there's no habitat for them to live. But we can also look on the positive side of things. Maybe this can be a stimulus for some innovative tour packages. Maybe there will be tourists interested in participating in coral bleaching surveys. We have opportunities to have events. Hawaii recently had a Bleachapalooza, which was an event where everyone came out to go on different reefs and report what they've seen, and it became a big social event as well. So maybe we can turn the negative into positive. And finally, we can use this as an opportunity to foster partnerships with other marine stakeholders to develop coral reef bleaching response plans, which are very important as we go forward, seeing that with changing climates, these situations may occur more frequently. And I just want to leave you with this infographic from NOAA about 10 ways we can protect the reefs. We as individuals can implement some of these suggestions in our daily lives so that we can protect our reefs, protect our tourism product, and lead to sustainable livelihoods. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Roche.
Okay, so thank you, Cedric and Shelley, for that overview of some of CIMH's technical products. So what the audience may have noticed is that these products are actually quite generic in nature. In fact, although they can be used by hoteliers, they're not yet tailored to your specific operating context. So this is why since 2014, the Institute, through its USAID-supported program for building regional climate capacity for the Caribbean, which going forward we'd simply call the BRCCC program, we've been working towards producing tailored climate early warning information for 6 climate-sensitive sectors in the Caribbean. And of course, tourism is just one of them. We're also working with 5 other sectors, and they are the agriculture sector, water, disaster risk management, health, and energy sectors. So in the case of tourism, this is where we are in terms of producing the information in the climate information chain. We have quite reliable science that enables us to produce climate information products months ahead. What we want to do now is to tailor that information for tourism, and then move towards, of course, integrating that information into tourism systems at the national level and even at the regional level, actually. So how do we intend to go about this? Well, we've proposed a 6-step methodological approach that's built on 3 core principles, and this approach and its principles is illustrated here in the schematic. And just so you know, the green boxes indicate our progress made so far. Since step 1, where we proposed to establish a user-centered mechanism, a governance mechanism to manage and coordinate this agenda, we're very pleased to say that we've been successful in formalizing that working relationship with the 6 sectors that we're working with. And that relationship has been formalized in a body that we call the Consortium of Regional Sectoral Early Warning Information Systems Across Climate Timescale Coordination Partners. It's a very long name, sounds very technical too, but this is who we are and what we look like. So this picture is actually from the first meeting of the consortium, which happened on May 6th and 7th of this year. Both the CTO and the CHTA attended this meeting, and tourism is actually very special in that regard because it's the only partner on the consortium with joint representation from both the public and private sectors. But we at CIMH felt very strongly about having that dual representation given the nature of the sector. So we wanted both CHTA and the CTO to be sitting at the table with us. So in terms of step 2, where we want to be is to baseline tourism user needs. And of course, the motivation from this comes from the Institute's desire to tailor products that climate inform the operational decisions of hoteliers and even tourism policymakers. But of course, to do that effectively, we have to understand your systems. Cedric alluded to this earlier. We have to understand your decision-making processes. And so this is why I want to encourage you to actively participate in a baseline survey that we're doing on the delivery of climate services in the Caribbean. We have drafted a specific survey for tourism, which is available through the link that you see there. Your participation in this study is, of course, voluntary, but we would very much appreciate you taking part so that we can produce products that are very useful to you going forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your time and attention today. Cedric, Shelley, and I would be very happy to take your questions in the time that we have left. And for those of you who do not get the opportunity to ask us questions in this session, we'll be very happy to follow up with you at a later time after the session. So thank you again.
Okay, do any of our attendees have any questions that they'd like to hear at this time? I have one regarding the trending that we're seeing. It looks like that we'll systematically can expect to see less rainfall, and something that's going to happen or sort of trending toward that way. What is the feasibility of desalination facilities across the region and the technology that is advanced that way? Is that something that we can sort of push from the hoteliers' perspective to our policymakers?
I think there can be a multi-pronged approach there. Ultimately, you will need to make sure that your operations will be supported by sufficient water. Now, this will come at high expenses. As we all know, desalination is a very costly venture because it requires lots of energy in order to transform salt water from the ocean into fresh water. So this is a costly thing. However, it might be more costly, as you know, to lose your tourists, your guests being there every year, rather than paying the extra amount for the desalination. One of the ways in which we can sustainably address this, and this is being rolled out in some of our communities, for instance in Beckway, on the public sector side, is to install desalination plants which are powered by solar power or wind power. Now, what is the advantage of that is that the added energy is provided for by renewables, and not only does that mean that the long-term energy costs are reduced, but also you generate more electricity during times in which drought is not so much of a problem. So that is kind of a win-win situation here, but with, of course, quite a large cost at the front end. So there are different ways to solve this problem, so to speak, but I think we need to approach the problem much more from the angle of reduce, reuse, and recycle water, rather than to look immediately into producing more water.
Thank you, Cedric. Here's another one that came through the chat. Regarding the impact on energy use and the rise in energy costs, how do you best see hoteliers impacting positive policy for control of energy costs? The growth in destination demand and high fuel prices surcharges are examples of this problem, and most islands do not allow significant capacity for renewable energy systems.
I believe this is a very fair assessment, and this is where we want to work together with you guys to make sure that we advance in the state of the art of understanding how we can best cope with drought. But there are some operational measures and also measures that are geared at relieving the tourists from heat comfort or heat stress levels, which would be elevated during a drought, and that can also speak towards energy efficiency. So one of the very practical examples of that is that generally speaking in the past, and this is also projected, I believe, for the near future, if you replace your air conditioning systems every 5 years, every time that should lead to halving of your energy consumption by DACs. Now, because the cooling needs are going to increase, this is one of the very practical examples of how to address this issue. But I would like to urge again that efficiency is something that we need to look at first before we start looking at increasing our expenses and investment into producing more energy.
Well, we just want to remind you that materials will be made available within 48 hours and will be emailed to all attendees. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks again to our panelists for your commitment and participation. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.